Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today for the lookalike webinar, Target Audiences on AdWords, Facebook, and Display with Call Analytics. Before we get started, I did want to go over a couple housekeeping items as usual. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please enter your questions into the chat box that you see in the lower left, and Kelly or I will do our best to answer them at the end of the call, time permitting. And if we don't get to them, we can follow up with you via email if you like. So please enter your questions as we go via chat. Also, I know I get this question a lot in the chat box, so I'll answer it right now. We are recording this webinar, and everyone who registered will get an email from us within 24 hours where we will provide you with a link that you can watch the webinar again. If you missed something or if you want to share it with a colleague, feel free. But you will get that via email, usually within 24 hours of the conclusion of the broadcast. So my name is Blair Symes. I'm the Director of Content Marketing here at lookalike. If you're not familiar with lookalike, we are the leading provider of actionable marketing analytics for inbound phone calls. So businesses and agencies use the data and intelligence from lookalike to generate better qualified inbound calls from their marketing, reduce their cost per call, as well as convert more callers to customers over the phone. So I'm really happy today to have my partner in crime, Kelly Schultz, Director of Digital Media and Analytics, joining us. Kelly, good to have you.
Great, thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So you won't hear Kelly's voice again for probably another 15 to 20 minutes after I start talking, but she will come back later to go over some best practices around targeting in a little more detail, since she's our resident expert. So again, when I like to begin our webinars, I do like to provide a couple slides up front with some statistics to show why this topic is important and really go over and hit the trends that inform the rest of the discussion for what it is we're talking about. So when it comes to targeting with digital advertising, it is important for marketers to understand the importance of digital. So the underlying and fundamental importance to digital for most businesses today. You can see on the left, recent stats from eMarketer shows that in the U.S., in terms of media spend, digital now makes up 40% of all dollars spent on media. So that is by far the most of any channel. And if you keep looking to the right, you can see that by 2020, that number is growing. And we're talking almost 50% of all dollars spent in the U.S. on media will be spent, will go towards digital advertising. And when you talk about digital, usually we talk about the big three, which is display ads, social ads, and paid search ads. And of course, within those, there's really the big two, which is Facebook and Google. So you can see the stats on the right, where Facebook makes up almost 40% of all display and social ad spend, where Google makes up 13%. And of course, when it comes to paid search, Google is still the giant. 74% of all paid search dollar spend in the U.S. goes towards AdWords. So, it is important to note that not only is a larger percentage of your budget being spent on digital, if you're like most companies, but also the more companies that pour money into digital, the more competitive it gets. And because it's getting so competitive, it is becoming very important for digital marketers to really take a more targeted approach to their digital ads across those channels. So you can see on the left, there are a wide variety of targeting options to try to get the right ad in front of the right person at the right time to drive that conversion. And many of these are ones you're familiar with, whether it's bidding on search keywords or targeting people by the day and time, or some demographic information about that person, or their email address, for example, or their browsing history on your website. There are a lot of data points that digital marketers today use, and it depends on your business and the goal of your ad campaign, but there are a lot of different data points you can use to try to get the right ad in front of the right person at the right time. So it is important to note that phone calls are also an extremely valuable data point that you can use for targeting. So you're doing all this other targeting. What about phone calls? So if someone calls you, that's often a great sign, a signal that they are a quality lead with high purchasing intent. And I'll go over some stats in a little bit, but research shows that someone who calls you, a customer that calls you, is often the best type of lead, and they convert to a customer at a higher rate. So someone who calls you is a great data point you can use to help inform your optimizations across your digital channels. It also is a great signal about how that person wants to engage. So when you're trying to create an ad campaign, whether the type of ad, creative or the landing page, if you know that someone wants to call, that's a great signal you can use and a data point you can use to help improve conversion rates. And we're going to go over all of this in much more detail today. So again, marketers can use this data to help inform their bidding strategies, their budgeting strategies, their targeting strategies, as well as make sure that you're presenting the right ad and landing page to people who are most likely to call you. So, why are phone calls becoming so important in digital advertising? So there are two reasons why, but one reason, of course, is the growth and explosion of smartphones as well as mobile advertising targeting smartphones. So you can see the data on the left across the three channels we're talking about today, social, Facebook, display, and paid search. There's been really an explosion of phone calls generated in the past few years, and you can see the growth trends that are expected up to 2019. We're talking about 110% growth in calls to U.S. businesses from digital ads, specifically from those channels of people who are on their smartphones. So why is that? It is because when you're engaging with a business, a website, a digital ad campaign on your smartphone, and you want to connect with that company, it's just much easier to use click-to-call, either from the ad itself or from a landing page, to get in contact right away with that business versus trying to fill out a web form and hopefully they will call you back or get in touch with you later that day, if you're lucky, if they either get in touch with you at all. So the other reason besides smartphones, of course, is that regardless of the device where someone's engaging with your digital ads, it is important in many of the biggest advertising industries we have, phone calls play an important role in the customer journey. So if your business sells products or services that are either complex, expensive, infrequently bought, or where someone has an urgent need for them, you're going to get phone calls. So you can see some of those stats on the right of the percentage of people who want to engage with those industries by calling. Automotive, a lot of people call their dealerships to schedule a test drive or get questions answered on pricing and inventory. When people are buying insurance or financial services, a high percentage do want to call and have a conversation. When you're booking cruise lines, for example, or if you're booking an appointment with your doctor, people still do call at a higher rate. When you're trying to book, if you're looking for senior care, for example, for a loved one, you're not going to drop that into a shopping cart online. You're going to want to call and have a conversation with that provider. So again, smartphones are driving calls, but also industries that are doing the bulk of the advertising in the U.S., those industries are usually ones that want calls as part of the customer journey. And those calls often convert to customers at the highest rate. So you can see the quote, a recent study by Forrester showed that customers who initiate inbound calls convert faster, spend more, and have a higher retention rate than those that don't. And other studies show that calls convert to revenue 10 to 15 times more than web leads across industries. So again, targeting callers, what we're talking about today, to generate these calls is a great way to boost the ROI and drive more valuable customers from your digital advertising. So Kelly will go into more detail on many of these, but I wanted to touch at a high level. What are the four main ways that you can target people using call data? One, of course, is retargeting or remarketing. You're probably familiar with doing this when somebody visits your website. Maybe you'll show them a display ad or a Facebook ad, or you'll bid more for them on paid search. But you can also use call data if somebody has visited your site or called your business and did not convert, for example, did not become a customer or an appointment. It's probably indicative that they're a quality lead. You can actually target them with special campaigns incentivizing them to call back and become a customer across AdWords, Facebook, and social. Upselling is a great strategy. You can target customers who prefer to call, with special ad campaigns promoting complimentary products. So if somebody bought a car from you, for example, maybe a few months later you want to target them with an ad campaign to come back and get maintenance or service. And if they called you as part of that initial customer journey to buy a car, they like to call. It's a great way to use calls as the main conversion path from that ad campaign. Same thing with re-engaging customers who haven't called in a while. So, for example, if you are, let's say you offer massage services, you've got a massage franchise. If someone has called you and booked an appointment, but haven't called in a while, maybe you want to target those people specifically with ad campaigns, asking them to call you back with a special offer. And the last one is really a really cool one, which is the lookalike idea. You may be familiar with this on Facebook, but you can use in display, AdWords, and Facebook, you can actually target new audiences who might not be familiar with you or who have never visited your website, but they resemble customers who have called you in the past and converted. You can target them specifically with ads to get them to visit your site, give you a call, and become a customer. And we're going to go into more detail on these a little later. Lastly, another strategy you can use when it comes to using call analytics to target people is exclusions. So you don't want to waste your ad dollars on audiences that are not right for that specific ad campaign or that are not going to be quality leads for you. So, for example, if someone has already called you from your careers page, as you can see an example of here from Sylvan, you probably don't want to target them with ads to become a customer because that's probably not the right audience for you. Or if you have an ad campaign that's geared towards new business, or if someone's already called you and become a customer, you probably don't want to target them. So again, think about what your ad campaign is trying to accomplish, the path you're giving people to convert, and then excluding people who want to call or have called you already from seeing ad campaigns that aren't relevant to them. So when you're trying to generate calls, I did want to show a couple strategies that you can use across the different channels in order to tailor your creative, your ads, and your landing pages to drive calls. So just two quick examples here, one from paid search and one from display. So you can see on the left, if you think that somebody is likely to call you, you can use call extensions, for example, in paid search to try to give them that option to call directly from the ad. Or if you're sure they want to call you, you can also use call now ads. The only path to convert on the right there is a phone call, but if you know that this person wants to call you, for example, if you're a locksmith or you think someone it's an emergency situation, go ahead and use call now ads to get them to call you right away. And also on display on the right, if someone clicked on either of these ads, they still go to a landing page. But it's the idea of speaking in the language and the preferences of somebody that you're targeting. So if somebody wants to call you and you know that, instead of showing the ad at the top where it says get a free quote, you can just change your call to action to call now in order to incentivize them to take action. So again, both ads would go to a landing page, but it's little tweaks of the language that you can use to help drive your conversion rates up. And again, if you're driving someone to your landing page, there are a couple of techniques you can use to make sure and make it easy for someone who wants to call you. So for example, on the left, this is an ad from a paid search campaign with Dish. You can there's no form here on the left. It's just a clear call to action to give Dish a call. So again, this shows that Dish has confidence that this person from this ad campaign wants to call, so they make it easy with a very clear call to action. Same with the celebrity cruise landing page. So this is a landing page where once you go there, a pop-up shows right away asking them to call you. So again, it could be something to test if you're confident that somebody wants to call you. Go ahead and make it easy for them to convert. And the last two examples are ones that you can use if you've got locations, for example, multiple locations. Make it easy for them to call with click-to-call buttons within your map or your find a location pages. And if you also have a call center, go ahead and give those headers and footers standing headers and footers on your pages where there's a phone number for your 800 number. They can call 24/7. And again, on the far right is eSurance. If you're not sure if somebody wants to convert by calling or by filling out a form, you can give them both options very easily. A call to action to call takes up very little space compared to a form. So if you've got forms on your site, it doesn't take up much landscape to add a call now, call to action up in the corner, just to make it easy for those people who want to convert by calling. So what are the four, when it comes to taking a data-driven approach to calls in order to do the targeting that we're talking about? So there are four main steps that we like to talk to our customers at lookalike about. The first is attribution. So if you're going to target people who like to call you, you do need to start attributing all the calls that you're generating across your marketing. And it helps to do that from not just the source of each call, but also the outcome of the call. So did the call result in an appointment or a sale? How valuable was that call? Capturing that information will help you with your targeting. The other piece, of course, is integrating that data into the various platforms that you use in your marketing stack, as well as the ad platforms that you use. And we'll show you in the next slide a little bit more about what that looks like. And then we can go in. Once you have that data, you're able to then use it to target audiences with that call analytics to get the right ad in front of the right person. And then, of course, attributing those calls, putting those calls back into the platforms you talked about, and then optimizing all of that to generate the best conversions at the lowest cost. So one last slide before I bring Kelly on to go into more detail on some of those targeting tactics. What kind of data should you capture for the phone calls that you're generating in order to prove your value and really do some more nuanced targeting? So there's three main buckets that we talk about here. The first, of course, is the attribution piece. What drove the call? The marketing channel, ad variation or campaign, the specific search keywords in paid search, and really the website interaction. If someone visits your site from that marketing ad, what path did they take and what page did they ultimately call from? All that data is valuable for targeting. As is the caller profile, so who the caller is, their phone number, the location where they're calling from, are they a first time or a repeat caller, the days and times that you're generating calls from various ad campaigns. If you have this data, it can help inform the way you target and optimize. And lastly, was the call a quality lead? So the goal here is not just generate calls, but generate appointments, generate sales, generate revenue, depending on what your business model is. So you do want to know if the calls you're generating from each source is a quality lead and one that you wish to optimize to generate more of. So a quick look here on the integrations piece. So we covered some of this already, but feeding the data you're capturing around each call into the various ad platforms and marketing stack technologies that you use to measure and optimize the customer journey. This is a necessary step in order to truly optimize for what happens online and over the phone. And Kelly will go into a bit more detail on some of these pieces. So without further ado, I will bring her in, and I will take a breath and drink some water.
Great. Thanks so much, Blair. So I'm going to get into very specific how to apply audiences in your AdWords, Facebook, and some of your display campaigns, and even go into some specific optimization. So the first part that I want to kind of get into is just, we're going to go into AdWords first. So keywords are great. We bid on keywords. We kind of live and die by keywords, right, as search marketers. We've got 4 different match types, technically: broad match modifier, phrase, and exact. We've got the content network, and we spend a lot of money on AdWords. I've been running AdWords campaigns for 10 plus years and on multiple different clients. I started out in the agency world, and so I've done a lot of different search campaigns. And AdWords spend specifically, and even Bing too, is just on the rise. There's so much opportunity the more that consumers are online, and even specifically on mobile devices, so desktop and mobile. And keywords are really important because keywords really help drive intent, right? We understand if somebody is what they're kind of looking for based on the keyword that they search. We know that they search for our brand terms. They're a little bit lower funnel. But we all have had those instances where we have these keywords that drive a ton of traffic and even maybe a ton of conversions directly within AdWords, whether it's a phone call or an online conversion. But those leads don't actually turn out to be quality. So the most important thing that I urge you to make sure of is understanding who is making that phone call, who is converting online. The more you know about that specific audience, those specific people, the better you can refine your keywords, add negatives, lower your bids on some of the broad match. I saw an initial question about B2B. B2B is very different than B2C, and sometimes your search keywords that you put out there, you accidentally get consumers instead of businesses. And so knowing the type of caller, the type of person that is actually converting online is the most valuable data that you can feed back into your AdWords is your audience data. So let's do a quick example on retargeting. So Blair did a few of these, but this is one for Sandals Resorts, right? So displays often, whether it's through the Google Display Network or through a specific DSP, a demand-side platform, display is meant to find new audiences or retarget people who've already kind of visited your site. But the great thing is that you can also really focus on the searcher as well. So say somebody sees your display ad, they end up calling your brand, they want to find more information, they don't do anything, right? You've identified this as a prospect but not a converter. The great thing is that you can actually add that caller, add that specific profile into AdWords, and then bid on that specific audience, right? And the most important thing here is that you want to get position 1. So you want to know this audience so that you can bid up into position 1. For sure on mobile, since there's less screen space, but even on desktop where they got rid of the AdWords got rid of the right rail. So you want to be in position 1 on your audience that is most likely to convert. So that's really where it's important to make sure that you are feeding your audience data back into your AdWords campaigns. And AdWords really, mobile search is a great tool for driving phone calls. 40% are more likely to call a business. It's really easy because you're on the go, right? And if you have that click-to-call feature or that call-only ad, it's either the only way to convert or the easiest way to convert or get in touch to get more information. And there's a lot of information, again, that you want to know about your customer to help optimize your bids and optimize your budget. So knowing when your audience is either on desktop or on mobile, right? Sometimes they're on mobile more often in the evening and more often in the morning on their morning commute, but they're on desktop during the middle of the day, during their lunch hour. So knowing exactly when consumers or your audience customers are on their mobile versus desktop device allows you to kind of adjust that budget and that bid. Location. I don't think a lot of us look at location information in terms of where our high converters are, and it's not always the case. But specifically for B2C, I used to run search campaigns for a company that sold cold weather gear. And the amount of search traffic that would skyrocket on the East Coast when the first snowstorm would hit, or in the Midwest when the first bout of cold weather hit, was just phenomenal. So knowing when where your customers are at and their search volume by location is also really, really valuable. Okay. So let's get into kind of the nitty-gritty here. And I'm using the new AdWords user interface as the screenshots here, just because I think a lot of us have probably transferred over. I can always share old screenshots if that's helpful as well. But the first thing you want to do is you really want to set up your audiences in AdWords. And how do you do that? At the top right of your AdWords user interface, there's kind of a little, it's like a wrench. And it actually gives you access to this screen here that I'm showing you. And the thing that I want to point out most specifically is your shared library, and specifically the audience manager. So this is where you really want to put some attention to, at least initially, to kind of build your audiences first, because it's going to be a lot easier than to add them to your campaigns and ad groups. So the first thing that you want to do is really start building your audiences within this shared library. And once you do that, you can build different audiences. So you can build just basic retargeting audiences from website visitors. You can build audiences that have access to your app to get them to use your app even more, right? That's really beneficial for e-commerce and other, I don't use a ton of apps, so I don't know all of them, but I use a lot of e-commerce apps. Grubhub, for example, and Uber, right? The more you use it, the more you spend with those businesses. So that's really important. You can actually build audiences off of YouTube users. AdWords has a great integration with YouTube. And then specifically, you can do customer lists. And that's really where we get into uploading kind of your CRM data, uploading maybe some of your offline data. So Blair was talking about uploading prospects who have called. Maybe they called from direct traffic, or maybe they've called from SEO traffic. That's how you first got in touch with this customer. Well, then you want to build these retargeting lists, right, and these similar audiences. So that's where you can build very specific customer lists. And I do this all the time. I refresh these lists. The website visitors and app users will refresh on its own, but making sure whenever you're uploading your offline data, always refreshing that list is really, really important. And if you do it here, it will take effect among all of your campaigns. So that's where I think it's really, really important to make sure that you are using this shared audience manager. The other thing, we spend a lot of money as marketers on events. So whenever you get an event list, this is another really great way to target them with different copy, with different messaging, maybe a specific promo. So again, add your event list. Anytime you get new customer lists, make sure that you're uploading them here. Okay. Remarketing. So very specifically, we just kind of gone over the create list of consumers who have called you in the past. Again, if they're current customers, you can label them. That's a very big tip. If they're current customers and you're trying to upsell them, your message is going to be a lot different. So make sure you label them as this is a customer list versus this is a prospect list. That's really important. And then maybe they called about a very specific product or a very specific service. Maybe you're a daycare or a hospital provider, and they called about the toddler program. I have a toddler, so this happens to me often. But you want to add these people based on what they're most interested in. So you can create multiple lists in AdWords in the shared library, again, and then just apply it to the specific campaigns that make sense. So it's great for companies with different products. It's great for companies with a lot of different services. And really quick, I think I'm going to get into this. Let me just make sure. We'll get into you see in the screenshot there's a targeting and observation. This is a little bit different in the AdWords UI, but just note that the targeting is actually only going to target your audiences and not anybody who searches for those specific keywords. And the observation, which is what Google mostly recommends, will do both. It just allows you to add a bid adjustment. I'll get into that a little bit more. And then similar audiences. So this is where Blair was talking about lookalike audiences. Google AdWords calls them similar audiences. Really, they're the same thing. I just don't want anybody to be confused. But basically, once you upload a customer list, or you have your website visitors or your app visitors, you can actually ask Google to create a lookalike audience off of this same list. So it's going to tell you how big your audience size is from your initial list, and then how big your audience size is on your similar audience, so your lookalike. And what that really allows you to do is find new customers that look like people who have already called, already done some type of action on your site, already engaged with your app once or twice, and it just gives you a little bit more opportunity to kind of spread your wings. It's kind of like the broad match keyword of the world, right? The lookalike is kind of that extra step into getting new people. Make sure that you report on these differently, because your customers who actually did call or already converted online is probably going to have a higher likelihood to convert again versus your similar. So just make sure that you look at these whenever you do bid adjustments. And then how do you add these now to campaigns and ad groups? So you can go, actually in the shared audience, I didn't include this screenshot, I apologize. You could actually add them to all campaigns directly from that shared library tab that I showed you earlier on, or you can go very specifically into your campaigns and ad groups and then navigate to the audience section, and this is what's going to pop up. So again, you can do the targeting, which will only target this audience. Sometimes I do this. This is kind of a tip. I will actually duplicate a campaign. Like I'll have a brand campaign, and then I'll have a brand underscore remarketing campaign. You can kind of see this here. And I choose targeting for that. They have the same keywords, but they have very, very different ad copy. And the reason I build a separate campaign is so that I can devote a very, very specific budget, because those are my highest converters. So then it just kind of takes away from the shared budget. It's really up to you. It's easier just to add the observation, because then it just allows you to adjust your bids based on the audience. Targeting will only serve that specific ad copy to the audiences. It won't serve it to anybody who searches on those keywords, if that makes sense. And then again, we want to make sure that you are reporting at an audience level. So this is really, really important. So specifically, if you're running Google Display Network, which I absolutely recommend for audience retargeting, you want to make sure that you're also looking at your view-through conversion by audience. So again, this just helps you decide how your audience is performing. It helps you decide how much budget to put in there and how much to bid up and down. So the first screenshot is specific to GDN. And that's where I just say, make sure that you're looking at the view-through as well, because most likely they'll convert in a different session, maybe direct traffic, and you won't get attribution data directly in AdWords unless you're looking at that view-through. And then for the search network, I kind of highlighted this section here. Again, you can get this by audience, so if you have your audience very specifically named out in specific nomenclatures. I just have an example of all users that have visited the site here, but you can have all non-converters, you can have all of these different audiences, and this is where you actually can do the bid adjustment. So again, make sure you know what your cost per conversion is and your overall cost, and so that you can adjust the bid accordingly. I always bid up. I mean, just standard out of the box before you even know what your performance is, I would say make sure to add at least a 25 to 50% increase on those bids, because if they are a retargeted audience and they're coming back to your brand, you want to be in position one. No doubt. So always add at least an initial bid adjustment, at least for the first 2 weeks, and then adjust up and down based on the performance. Okay, so that is AdWords kind of in a nutshell. I know it's a lot of information. There's a lot that can go into audience targeting, so I just wanted to give you some initial tips. So then I'm going to jump into Facebook. Again, Facebook is, I tell this a lot to people, Facebook is awesome. And not just for a consumer to use it and connect with people, but consumers, people, whether or not you are targeting B2B or B2C, they send so much information through their Facebook, whether they like a specific soda brand or they like the cooking channel. So gives you a lot of different lifestyle demographics. You tell Facebook, and when I say you, it's just kind of overarching the U.S. population. You tell Facebook your age, you tell them often your marital status, you tell them where you live, where you've lived in the past, what movies you like, and you start to kind of get a better understanding of who your target audiences are. It tells you if they're attending an event, right? If they're attending possibly a Disney on Live, I just did this, you know that they probably have a toddler, right? Or they have a really strong interest in Disney. So it's just, you get so much information about a person and a specific audience from Facebook. But very similar to keywords is that it gives you an idea of who your target audiences are. But as marketers, we don't want to just look get people to hit our site, right? We want, or to make a phone call. We want to convert them into a customer. Obviously, visiting our site or making a phone call is a good first step, but you really want to find those audiences that take that next step. So that's really where audiences come into play for Facebook. And Facebook has a very similar model to AdWords in terms of how do you build audiences. So in your Facebook ads campaign, whether it's in the Ads Manager or the Business Manager, you can do this in either. You can build, again, very specific custom audiences, or in Facebook, they call it lookalike audiences, whereas AdWords called it similar audiences. Again, it's very much the same thing. But this is really where you want to start uploading that same data that we talked about in AdWords, where you want to upload customer or prospects who've called in the past about a specific product, and then you want to find a lookalike audience similar to them. So this is really important in terms of how you want your audiences, or naming your audiences and how you want to target specific people in Facebook. So again, this is hard to read, I apologize, but you can do kind of website traffic. You can do it based off the Facebook pixel. So anybody who has visited a very specific product page, so you can do just one of your subfolders, and then you can do custom combinations. You can add customers if you're doing a upsell campaign. You can add prospects. So very similar to AdWords on this front. And then the lookalike audience is the next screenshot underneath. And again, apologies, this is a little bit hard to see, but you can actually define your audience size. So the lower audience size that you tell Facebook you want to create, the more specific it's going to keep it to your custom audience. The wider, obviously, the higher reach that you get, but you kind of risk less attributes that are similar to your current retargeting audiences. So just something to keep in mind here. And then these are kind of, it shows you just your saved campaigns here. Basically, what's your custom versus what's your saved, what's kind of that list size when you created it. So I run my own campaigns, digital campaigns, with one other person, so I could probably do better at naming my campaigns to make them better. But you can see I've got caller data, I've got my different types of contacts, I've got lookalikes, when I uploaded that one last, what's my retargeting audience. So you can do saved audiences, which again uses the Facebook data, your custom audiences, which is your first-party data, and then your lookalike audiences from that. So I think that that's really important to build your list, because then you guys, once you build them, you can apply them very easily to your ad sets and your ad campaigns. And that's really where putting some initial upfront time into this is going to help you out in the long run and help your direct reports or whoever manages your campaigns in the long run. And if you are a franchise or you have a multi-product or multi-service lines, but maybe you have different Facebook accounts, or Facebook ad accounts, you can actually share these audiences among different Facebook accounts. This is really, really insightful. I actually don't do this right now because we don't have a sister company or anybody else that we share our first-party data with. But if you do, it's a really great way to kind of upsell, right? You sold them on one product, maybe you want to pass them over to one of your partners. It really gives you an opportunity to share your data among business units. And again, just make sure to label nomenclature. If you've done webinars with me before, you are doing them right now. I am very, very, very specific about nomenclature. I think the more that you name your campaigns, your audiences, your assets, the better you will be able to understand how the performance goes. And then let's get very specific into audience performance. So this is, again, a screenshot of actual Facebook Ads Manager. This is mine. You can see that there's basically the account overview, right? There's 4 different tabs in Facebook. If you're not familiar, there's account overview, which just shows your overall account. So one line item. There's your campaigns, there's your ad sets, and then your ads. So just for the sake of time, I'm only showing you the ad sets. And the reason I do this is because I actually name my assets the audience. That maybe sounds crazy, but I want to know what is, right, if I'm in a campaign, I want to know within that campaign who are the different audiences I'm targeting within these ad sets. And then because you build your creative at the ad set level. So that's just why it's really important, I think, to have different nomenclatures and really label out your audiences. If you put the time in up front, it's going to make it a lot easier. It is time in up front, but it really will help. And then make sure to report on every conversion, right, that your audience is taking. So obviously we look at reach, we look at frequency, kind of the basic performance metrics, but then you want to look at website conversions, which you're just using your Facebook pixel, but then you want to look at offline conversions, right? So maybe they're making another phone call, maybe they're doing an in-store visit. AdWords, Facebook, Bing, all of these platforms have these offline conversion uploads. So just by uploading your phone calls, Facebook actually matches it back to that audience-specific person. So make sure you're uploading this data. Upload these offline sets. The more data you have in your Facebook and your AdWords UI, just the better you're going to say, yep, this one gets more budget, this one needs to get cut, this audience needs to have a higher bid. This is where you're doing this action, so put your data directly in your user interfaces. It's just going to make your life a lot easier and your campaigns much better performing. So again, these are my tips. I'm speaking as a broken record. Name your campaigns based on your audiences and goals. So if this is a retargeting specific campaign or an upsell campaign or a prospecting campaign to find lookalike audiences, name them that way, right? It just helps you kind of understand more where your budgets are going and what's performing at a high level. Customize your ad sets. Make sure that you are building the creative, right, your ads, your image, your headline, to the very specific audience that you're trying to target. So if you're upselling them on a specific product or you're trying to get them to sign up for a product that they've already inquired about, make sure that your ad messaging matches that. And then make sure, again, to set your budget and bid. So this is really where you want to improve on your ROI. So the better that you set your budget and bids to drive conversions and customers, the better you're going to look to your CEO and the better you're going to look to your boss. As a digital marketer, we get a lot of data questions, right? So just be really on top of how you're adjusting your bids and budgets and achieving ROI. Okay, again, that's Facebook in a nutshell. I know that this is a lot of information, guys, so bear with me. I actually don't have as many screenshots for display. I just have a few more slides here just because display is not really a one-size-fits-all platform. But the main thing about display is that display is really a branding tool, right? It's really to drive awareness. It's really to get your message out there to a very specific audience or, again, to an audience that's already visited your site and maybe looked at a very specific product or service page or called about a specific product or service. So we're spending more and more on display, specifically in mobile and mobile apps, right? We all get those. And whether or not you click out of them right away or you scroll past them, you still recognize it in your brand or in your mind. And so that brand is really putting its message in front of you as quickly as possible and as most effectively as possible. So there's a lot more spend going into display to drive this lower funnel activity. But because display is such a top of funnel activity, the conversion rates are awful. I cannot tell you, every single boss I've had in the past 10 years has said, cut all display spend, just cut it, it's not worth its time, we're not seeing direct conversions. Well, if you think about display as what it's really meant to do is to drive lower funnel conversions and people to search for your brand or people to visit your site directly, you think about it a little bit different way. But that's really where then view-through conversions come into play. But again, display is all about audiences and attribution. So making sure that you are targeting a very specific audience in display is going to help prove that worth, that spend. So this is where, again, you can use your call data. And really when we say call data, I also mean just your offline first-party data. So it's really easy to place a pixel and just let your retargeting, online retargeting kind of play. But by feeding back your call data, so prospects who called about a specific car, right? This is Mazda, or maybe they made an appointment to test drive the MX-5 Miata is a sample. I'm not really a car person, but right, you know that they're in the market for a sports car. You know that they're in the market for something. So maybe you're running a deal on these cars next month, or there's a lease promo or a financing promo. So the more you know about that audience, the better you can serve up the creative. So that's really where it's important to integrate your call data into your DMPs, your data management platforms, which, there's a whole bunch out there. There's MediaMath, Trade Desk, Turn. I don't even know them all, to be honest with you, but making sure that you just feed all of your audience data into your DMPs and your DSPs. Maybe it's into DoubleClick Campaign Manager if you're running display campaigns on your own. But just feeding that data into there is really going to help you hone down on your audience, build very specific creative. And again, in display, you're paying cost per 1,000 impressions. And the better audience targeting that you get, it's going to be more expensive. So just make sure that those dollars are really working as hard as possible. So that's all I have on display. So I'm going to pass it back to Blair to kind of wrap it up.
So just a quick customer example of ours for display, for lookalike specifically. So Comfort Keepers, if you're not familiar with them, they're a leading provider of in-home senior care. So they've got around 450 independently owned franchise locations in the U.S. where people who have loved ones who want to stay in their home, who need care, can call Comfort Keepers up and can get a specialist, an expert, a caregiver to come and help them remain in their home. So it's the senior care, senior living industry. And, of course, like we said earlier in the presentation, people who are booking senior care want to call. So 70% of their conversions are phone calls because it's a really important decision. You're doing it for a loved one. You really do want to have a conversation and ask questions. So Comfort Keepers uses the data captured by LookalikeTech around any call that comes into their business from any marketing source. They know the characteristics of those callers who have gone on to convert and become a customer of theirs. They feed that data into their DMP, which in this case is Quantcast. And by doing that and retargeting new lookalike audiences with the same ad campaigns that worked to get people to call and become customers, they're able to extend their reach, and they were able to drive 4 times more calls using that lookalike campaign strategy and display than the next best tactic. So it really does work if you've got the right data and you've optimized your ad campaigns and creative to generate the outcomes that you would expect from targeting that group. So, it wouldn't be a LookalikeTech webinar if I didn't at least give you a couple of things to consider that we didn't really cover, and I'll do this in about 10 seconds. One would be you can use that call data we talked about to actually route each caller in real time differently in order to get them to the right person, the right agent, the right location to convert them to a customer. So something to think about if you've got a call center where you're routing callers into with agents who have different specialties, or you've got a ton of businesses across the country and you want to send local callers to their closest branch, for example, you can use data that you captured on the call in real time to inform where that call gets routed. The second point is when that call goes into your call center or to an agent or to a store, you can actually pass that information in real time again to those agents before they answer the call. So they know who the caller is, they know the keyword search or the web page or the marketing channel that drove that call before they actually begin the conversation, so they can have a much more seamless, personalized, profitable conversation because they know who the caller is and what they're calling about. And lastly, of course, as marketers, it's the idea that you can actually get access to what happens on the phone calls you're generating into your call center or into your stores or into your dealerships or your remote agents. As a marketer, you can actually sit at your desk, pull up that data, and really do some interesting searches to find, okay, let me see every call that went to this location from this particular keyword during this time frame. And then you can see what was said on the call, and you can really dive in and get some really interesting analytics around that. So again, as marketers, something to think about. We didn't cover any of this on today's presentation, but if you're thinking about, oh, what else can I do, here are 3 things that are great ideas. So in summary, before we get to the Q&A session, as we covered, digital advertising is exploding. It's extremely competitive. It's really important that you show the right call to the right person at the right time. And you can use that, the right ad to the right person at the right time, and you can use that using call data. And when you're ready, of course, lookalike can help you do it. So I know that Kelly and I are both excited about calls, and we talked very quickly when we present, and we covered a ton of material. So I see we've got a lot of questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can with the time we have left. But if you want to learn more about lookalike and call analytics and using that to improve your ROI from digital advertising, visit our website or send us an email or give us a call. Okay, deep breaths. If you have any questions, keep putting them into the online chat, but basically I'm going to start asking some with the time we have permitting. So I've got one here, which is a good one from a person who works at a law firm who doesn't have the right legally to use retargeting. So are there any targeting strategies that might work for this person? So I guess if you're not able to capture a ton of data, if you do have a customer list, for example, you might be able to use their phone number or their email address for targeting.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure how to answer that either. I apologize. I guess I assume that everybody can use their own first-party data. I 100% not being able to use kind of third-party data. It is really, really important to note that from a privacy standpoint, though, you actually don't need to ever feed in a first name, a last name, a company. You don't need to feed that data into AdWords or Facebook to use the retargeting or lookalike features. Literally, a phone number is totally fine. An email address is totally fine. You can really give these tools and these platforms minimal data, and actually you'll never, until there's a conversion, so until somebody fills out a form or makes a phone call into your brand and gives you their first and last name, you're actually not going to see any of that data in AdWords or Facebook. So that's all going to still be very proprietary, and if there's any privacy concerns from that, Google and Facebook are both very, very specific. Actually, you can't feed first name, last name, basically personally identifiable information in a way that displays in those platforms. So the only way you'll be able to get that conversion data is through that person making themselves known through a web form or through a phone call.
So we do have a question. I'm going to just keep rolling here on B2B. I know a lot of the examples we showed were a little more B2C focused, but the strategies still work for B2B. So the question is really around what about targeting examples for B2B? So I can start and maybe you can jump in. So I know if you're in B2B and you've got an educational sale, for example, a lot of things you can do to begin is to use content marketing, create ebooks, webinars like this one where people have to register, advertise those out however through your Facebook is a great way to do it. LinkedIn is a good way to do it. You can use email or content syndication programs just to spread out and get registration information from people from your content, and then you can go ahead and retarget those people to try to get them to call you and have a conversation across digital channels. And
we still get a lot. I think that one of the questions that this person had also was very specific to desktop versus mobile. We still get a lot of desktop traffic. I know we say that mobile, that search has definitely gone mobile, and we have seen a huge influx of mobile traffic, but that doesn't mean that you're still not going to see a good amount of desktop traffic. And we still get calls, manually dialed calls from the call extension that serves on a desktop device. So it's really just dependent on kind of who your audiences are. If you're more heavy on desktop, I would still say use every single ad extension that makes sense for your business, whether it's a phone call, site links, review extensions. The more ad extensions that you have, the more Google is actually going to show your ad at a more reasonable cost. Google has publicly come out and said that ad extensions, any type, whether it's call, location, will improve your click-through rate by 8% on average, which will decrease your cost per click. So even if you're very desktop specific, I would say still make sure to use all of the ad extensions and make sure everyone has an opportunity to convert in any which way. So that's really important.
So we got a question here around remarketing and CRMs. If you don't have a CRM in place, what's the best way to use remarketing? If you don't currently have remarketing in place, what is the low-hanging fruit that would be easy to do and get started for targeting? So do you want to? So, I mean, at least the first part of that question, what is the best way to collect information to use for remarketing if you don't have a CRM? You don't need a CRM if you've got a marketing automation system to collect data. You can collect data in spreadsheets. So you can collect data, if you use lookalike for call analytics, when we collect the phone number when somebody calls you. So there are a ton of tools beyond. You don't need to have Salesforce or a proprietary CRM in order to collect customer data. You just need to have a list that you can import into AdWords or Facebook or
like I mentioned before, if you attend an event and you get an event list, if you have business cards, I know this feels so manual sometimes, but trust me, there's still such big companies, and I've been in this space for a really long time, but I still do so much manual work that sometimes it's frustrating, but it's so worth it, because if you think about some of your competitors, maybe similar-sized competitors, maybe they're not putting in the effort to do that manual work. So if you do it right away, you have that edge just from kind of getting that in place right away. So even if you do have business cards that you collect, start inputting them for retargeting, right? I think it's still really valuable to kind of do that.
So I think we have time for one more. There's a question here around display ads being expensive with a low ROI, Kelly, this is a good one for you then. How you go ahead and sell internally the idea that a business should be allocating budget towards display?
It is my hardest sell, I promise. You are not alone on that sell. So the one thing I would say is start small. There are vendors out there, even if you just do GDN, right, you don't have to do a minimum spend. So locking yourself into a minimum spend of a few $1,000s every month is probably going to scare your bosses more than anything. So start really small. Start with just retargeting, right? Start with even Facebook retargeting and GDN retargeting, and start to see, am I getting a higher lift on more branded search, right? Am I getting a higher lift? Am I getting more display traffic? Kind of test around. Do a stop and start campaign. I mostly recommend evergreen campaigns where they're always on. But test around with some of your lower platforms, specifically GDN, where you decide how much you want to spend every day. And even Facebook, right? Build those retargeting audiences. If you start to see an effect from that, then you can actually start using a DMP and a DSP. And again, you don't need to have, there's vendors out there that are very small agencies that will allow you to spend a few thousand month-to-month contracts so that you're not locked into anything, right? And again, start with audience specific. Don't just kind of cast a wide net. I find that it seems appealing to kind of just get your brand out there to anybody who will look at your brand or your ads. But if it's not a relevant person, then you're just wasting those CPM dollars. So even if that cost per impression just seems a little bit high to you, do your best to obviously negotiate it down, but go ahead and test it. Just don't commit to anything other than a month-by-month or anything that your boss would not say, yep, let's decide to pull it, let's test something else. Give yourself that flexibility. There's definitely vendors out there. But the main thing that you want to see from your display is you want your branded search traffic to rise, right? We all know that branded search is our most efficient. So you want to see that. You want to see SEO and direct traffic increase. So that's a good proxy if you don't have a multi-channel attribution tool to kind of see how those get impacted. And I think I'm out of time.
Well, we have hit the hour mark, so I wanted to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you for all your questions. If we didn't get to them, we can follow up with you via email. Be on the lookout for an email from us probably in the next 24 hours with a link to the recording. If you want to watch anything again, I know Kelly and I cover a lot of material. And if you have any questions, if you want to, just visit the Dialogue Tech website. We got some resources there that could help, as well as we'd love to have a conversation with you to understand more of your marketing needs around call analytics. So thanks again, and we will see you next time.